I'll turn it on over to Ernie. Welcome, Ernie.
Okay, thank you, Joni. And let me begin by saying how much I hate Zoom meetings for this purpose, but I understand, and I'm happy for the opportunity to do it nonetheless. What I miss about the Zoom meetings is the audience immediacy of the interaction, watching reactions and, things like that. But that is what it is, and that's the era we're in. So no problem. So let's move ahead. Let me see here. Let me share screen and go here and go here. Okay, we should be in the PowerPoint right now. I'm assuming I am.
I see a blue and purple screen.
Yeah, the blue screen of death. Yeah, but we'll get there. But anyway, as Joni said, my talk tonight is there is a marmot in my pack, which does sound like a strange title, but it happens to be the title of my book, and we'll get into that a little bit later. And Joni mentioned a little bit of my background, but people say, well, how, what makes it so that you can write a book that we want to read? Well, I want you to know that I've been recognized as outstanding in my field. And of course, the book, by the say, Mysteries, Encounters, and Reflections of 30 Years as a Nature Writer. But having, as I said, being recognized as outstanding in my field, I have proof of that. So there I am, outstanding in my field. And all right, little humor, not much. But my adventures over 30 years, actually approaching more like 40 years now as an outdoor writer, have really taken me all over the world. Fortunately, I've had everywhere from the Arctic north to the Everglades to the Rockies to the Eastern Sierras to some of the most spectacular places on Earth. And over the years, I would a lot of my adventures would I'd write about the things that I did and I was involved with, and a lot of them were simply stories of interest to people, or interesting trails like this one at Torrey Pines. And this is mile 1.2 and so forth, and what you'd see. And I got to give my wife credit, and this is my darling wife, on one of our hikes in the Eastern Sierra in the fall, which is a very special time to me. She said to me, your stories are good. They're interesting, but there's no heart to them. It's all facts. And, sometimes I want to know, how do you feel when you're out in these places? And so I give her credit to pulling me into stories that, if you've read me for years, are now a little bit more from the heart. They try to touch on the feelings of the outdoors and how they make you feel, rather than just a travel log or a diary of a place that you visited. So keep that in mind when you read some of the things that I write in various publications. Let's see, push the right button here. Oh, what's going on? And this is as an example. This is the 17 Palms Oasis out in Borrego. You're going, okay, big deal. It's the Milky Way. But I didn't go out there in the wintertime. I went out in the summertime. In the middle of summer, it was 114 degrees at 10 o'clock at night, sitting there taking pictures of the Milky Way. And again, a very special connection in that kind of moment when you're there. That's not in this book, but it will be probably in a future book, the column that I wrote about midnight at the Oasis. And some of you might be old enough to remember that song. So over the years, people have said to me, you ought to write a book. And I don't want to write a book. That's a lot of work. And then one day it dawned on me that I had the makings of a book. I had years and years of columns, some of them not particularly impressive, but some of them a little bit more meaningful, at least to me. And so I thought, maybe I'll compile those into a book. And that's what I did. This is the cover of There's a Marmot in My Pack. And again, it's some of the best columns that I think I've written over the 30 years as a nature writer. And I call it a toilet reader, and I don't mean that in any irreverent sense. But it's the kind of book, there's no plot, there's no thread that runs through the book. It's simply a collection of 40 or so columns that can be read standalone. You could read the first one first, or the last one first, or the middle of the book first, when you sit down to at a leisure time and you want something to read. So that's kind of how the book is structured and how it works. People ask, what did you include? Well, as I pointed out, things that have touched me deeply emotionally are the things that I've written about a lot. And the first chapter of the book is called The Happy Dancers. And I don't know how many of you have had the privilege to go to the Arctic or some other area, maybe Norway or places like that, and see the Northern Lights. But it was always a bucket list thing for me. And it was a bucket list thing, again, from a technical standpoint. I was challenged by being able to take pictures in this harsh winter Arctic environment. And when we were there, it was 23 degrees below zero. And the challenges that faces in terms of battery life and so forth and so on. And so that's all I was focused on. And we got to Fairbanks. In fact, I told my wife, I said, honey, let's go on a winter vacation. And she says, oh, wow, we going to go to the Caribbean or Hawaii? And I went, no, Fairbanks. And she wasn't really hot on the idea. No pun intended. But turned out she loved it as much as I did. But anyway, we get to Fairbanks and we were having dinner on the first night that we arrived. And our waitress was a young native Athabascan. And she said, what are you doing in Fairbanks in the wintertime? And I said, well, we're here to photograph the Northern Lights. And she says, oh, you mean the Happy Dancers? And I went, oh, really? I said, tell me more. Well, the folklore of the Athabascans is that the Northern Lights are the spirits of the departed. And I even have a little trouble talking without emotion about this because it touched me deeply with the story that she shared with me. And she said, if you summon these spirits by whistling, they will appear in the sky and they will come down and lift you to heaven and dance with you. And I thought, wow, how incredibly beautiful that was. And so on the best night of our trip, when we took these photographs, I was standing out, this is believe it or not, on a frozen lake. And I was standing there at 23 below zero, and off to the right-hand side of the screen here, this green ball appeared. And so I began to whistle. And as I did, as you can see the lines going across the picture from right to left, the first line went across in about the speed of a jet plane leaving a contrail, followed then by a second line. And then these lines began to merge and to form. And I stood there whistling, and the tears were running down my cheek as I thought about the spirits of the departed and many family and friends that I've lost. And it was just very, very emotional to me. And so I wrote in the first chapter of my book is called The Happy Dancers. This is another picture on that beautiful evening. My emotions flowed within, followed by tears of joy as I stood in the frozen Arctic night, transfixed by the magnitude of the show. I was knee-deep in snow, but heart-deep with emotion. So many of the things that I write about, again, are these deep connections. And perhaps sanity is not one of my better traits. The Arctic at 23 below, and then a while later in Anza-Borrego at 111 degrees in the midsummer August heat. My goal here was to see if I could get some good photographs of desert bighorn sheep. I had driven out to Borrego Palm Canyon, which I suspect many of you have birded in that area. It's a wonderful area, very rich in habitat and in bird activity as well as other animals. But my goal was to hike a short distance. I may not be the most sane person in the world, but I'm not stupid. And I realized I wasn't going to hike 5 miles in 111 degree heat. But I started a short distance up the trail with hopes of encountering a bighorn sheep. And as I did, I came around a bush on this narrow trail, and there I was about 20 feet face to face with this massive bighorn ram. And we both stood there for a moment, and there was no fear. And it was just kind of a momentary connection. You can see, look at the horns that are chipped and weathered from battle. and the broomed ends of his horns. I mean, this was a magnificent male leader of his herd and respected. And we stood there and we looked at one another, and I realized, if he wanted to go where I was, which was the trail, he could have easily bowled right through me. But there was no moment of fear between either of us, I don't believe. We stood there and gazed at one another for quite a while. And it was a magnificent moment of connection. And I wrote, and I have to keep doing this. Whoops, I've got to go back. So many lessons were exchanged as we watched one another, two old warriors of life, showing our age, but also our respect for what each has endured to arrive at this moment and place in time. For a time, it was like old friends sitting silently together and reflecting on lives that have seen things, done things, won, lost, lived, and survived. There was the acceptance, calm, compassion, and understanding that seems to come with age. These were a few golden moments, and they truly were. That same evening, after returning from my hike, it was cooled down now to maybe 104. It wasn't too bad, very calm, very nice in the evening. I set up a camera trap. If you notice, if you've been to the Palm Canyon Trailhead, there's a small pupfish pond there, right by the parking area, and it's in the evening, as the sun begins to set and the last vapors of day are vanishing, the bats will start to come out, and they skim along the surface of the pond to capture insects. So it was a great place because you could kind of predict that they would be very close to the surface of the water, so you could put your sensor scanning across the water, and if the bat flew along and broke the beam of the sensor, flashes would go off and you'd get a picture. And so this is one of the pictures of a Mexican big-eared bat that I was fortunate to capture. But I did some research, and I was just fascinated by these incredible little mammals. And you can see they're fur-covered. They're just wonderful animals, and truly a high-tech wonder of the mammalian world, with all of their echolocation and very sophisticated animal sonar that they have. And so I wrote that bats can fly at night in total darkness, in fact, often quite rapidly, using a high-tech technique known as echolocation as a form of animal radar. This allows them to avoid obstacles as small as the human hair. Can you imagine that? And also, of course, to be able to detect insects, which they can then they can target as they're flying. So just a fascinating connection with these marvelous creatures. Another very moving moment was an invitation from a group of Kumeyaay tribal leaders from several of the local tribes, inviting me to join them on a journey to one of their ceremonial caves at a very remote location out in the Anza-Borrego Desert. It was a four-wheel drive a trip of some distance, and then on foot at the rest of the distance until we got to this cave. And when we arrived, this gentleman from the La Posta Kumeyaay band began with a saging ceremony, which they ignite white sage, which is supposed to drive away any evil spirits, to purify the environment that you're in, and to bring blessings upon those who are present. Very moving ceremony, and it was a very moving time to be here with these people of the land. And I wrote, I was surrounded by the descendants of those who have occupied this sacred place for more than 10,000 years. The blood of those who created this delicate rock art still runs in their veins. There was a powerful sense of reverence as we huddled in this wilderness rock shelter. It truly was something that touched me quite deeply. So a lot of people have asked me, well, how did my book get its name? And that's a good question. I'm not totally sure myself, but the events that created it happened here. And for any of you that have hiked in the Yosemite area, that you may have been here. If you come up from Lee Vining from 395 up the 168, I believe that is, or is that 120? I don't know. Into the East Gate, entering Yosemite, there above Tuolumne Meadows. there is a trailhead right there at that entry station, which goes north up over a ridge and down into this basin called the Gator Lakes Basin. It's a magnificent area. As you can see, it's beautiful, dotted with a bunch of different lakes. They're gin clear lakes, and it's not an area that you find a ton of people. I was there the entire day and never saw another soul. So it was, it was just beautiful. And I'd packed a lunch, and my plan was to spend the day fly fishing there. And so I got there, dropped my day pack on the rock and opened it up and got some fishing gear out and tied on a fly and started fly fishing in that beautiful clear water. And for those of you who've never fly fished, and everything I do is catch and release with barbless hooks, it's more of a connection with a wild thing, and it's magnificent. You toss that little fly out and it makes a small ripple on the water when it lands, and you can see in the clear water down 30 feet and watch the fish like little torpedoes with their colors flashing in the water as they dart to the surface and try to capture the fly. Sometimes they'll get it, sometimes the first one will miss it, and the second or the third or the fourth one will come up and bump it, and then finally be hooked, and then the battle is on and you reel them in and let them go. And it's kind of a mindless, beautiful opportunity to blend with nature and be a part of nature for a time. And I did this for several hours, and it was time for lunch. So I decided, okay, let me go over and get my lunch. And so I reeled in my line and walked over towards my day pack. And as I approached the day pack, here with his head in my pack and his tail hanging out is Mr. Marmot. Well, my camera was also in the day pack, so I didn't get a picture of him with his head in the day pack, but oops, there we go. But there he was, and he wasn't frightened away by my yelling at him to get out of my lunch. And so I think he knew that if he hung around long enough, he might get something. And sure enough, I had a bag of trail mix in addition to my sandwich, and so I tossed him some nuts, and he was quite happy to receive that offering. But so that became the experience that I wrote about, and then that led to, oh, that makes kind of an interesting book title if there's a marmot in my pack. So now you know. And for those of you that have not encountered a golden marmot, as this one is so called, they're just delightful little creatures. They're very curious, and they're not particularly frightened of people, as I discovered that day quite easily. All right. Another one of my favorite subjects of my column is a guy I call Morning Joe. He's my morning coffee buddy, especially in the summer and late in the summer towards fall. I like to sit out on the patio in the mornings with my morning paper and a cup of coffee, and just enjoy the sunrise in the morning. And I began to notice that every day, not within 10 feet of me, this little hummingbird would come in and land on the delicate tip of the agave. And there's two hummingbird feeders above him, so that's basically what he was doing. He was kind of guarding over the lord of the feeders, if you will. You know how they are. And but we actually had some very excellent conversations. We solved a lot of the problems of the world, and debated some of the more controversial topics of our times. And so it was very interesting. So I've written several stories about Morning Joe, and including, I must admit, it has become more than a novelty. My heart soars when I see my new friend, such a tiny, delicate, and beautiful work of nature. And that is one of the joys of being able to sit there in the mornings and enjoy Morning Joe. Every spring here on Mount Hu, and let me describe Mount Hu for you. Obviously, it's named because of the great horned owls here that we hear often serenading us at night. First of all, in the milder times, we sleep with all of our windows and doors open. There, everything is screened. And our home is located on a little mountain that's about 1 mile long and about 200 feet wide. Now, it doesn't drop off like a square shelf. It sort of starts to slope off in 200 feet into native vegetation. We don't have any fences here, and we've created a habitat that is very conducive to wildlife. We want to provide for the wildlife and share our home with them, since we have intruded into their territory. And so the key to that is the only thing we feed are the birds, but we put out water, and that brings in a lot of critters who come in to take advantage of the water. I think that's probably one of the single most important aspects to attracting wildlife to your house is good water. But anyway, every spring we get a crop of coyote puppies, which is just delightful to see. And initially I purchased several, well, 8 trail cameras, which I scattered around the property. And as you know, the trail cameras at night, they take infrared pictures, just black and white photos like you see here. But they're good pictures, and they allowed us to capture some photos of the coyotes as they come and visit. And it was interesting to kind of get a feeling for their patterns of travel and so forth and so on. Now, over the years, now I've graduated to a more sophisticated camera trapping system, which uses actually a very high quality professional camera, and has allowed me to gather some much better portraits of our animal neighbors. And for those of you that, I don't know if this sound will work, we'll try it. Can you hear this?
No, we can't hear the sound. The video looks good though.
Okay, well, you all get the idea of what's going on here. They are just hysterical. They're going crazy. And this is about 30 feet from my bedroom door. So this is something that happens occasionally. They'll wake us up in the middle of the night when they're having some kind of a frenzied debate over something, or a kill, or whatever it is they're doing. Another one of my favorite animal visitors are our quail. Because we, as I said, don't have any fences, and we slope off into native vegetation and provide seed and water. On a daily basis, we have the quail that come up out of their native habitat and wander onto our property to drink and to eat the bird seed. And so I've written stories about what I call the muttering army, because it's kind of like a native alarm clock, a natural alarm clock. At dawn every morning, as they pass our bedroom window, they kind of speak to one another in a very soft muttering, kind of a little, you know how quail make a noise, and it's like a little, and they're talking to one another. And I think it's to locate, so they all kind of know where each other are located. And that was amplified to me one day when I have some ground cover that's taller than the quail, and they were all moving through that ground cover, and they were doing the same thing. So they were all kind of letting each other know where they were. And what I love about the quail is their social nature. One parent or one adult male and one adult female will often take care of a whole bunch of little chicks. And they're very attentive. Usually the male will sit up on a high point watching for an evil Cooper's hawk or some other predator to come around, and if they do, he'll issue a little alert, and everybody will scamper into the cover. And by the way, that's for quail, that's important. We never used to get quail here, and I couldn't figure out why. But as our plants began to mature, and where I put my bird feeders, my seed feeders, was right in the vegetation, not out on the open ground. So I actually have the shepherd hooks, which I stick in the ground in the hedges, for instance, so that the seed that drips out onto the ground, onto the dirt. But it also allows then the quail to feed very close to sheltered places. So if there is danger, they can just a step or two, and they're hidden. They're back in the in a safe place. So it's good. But I love the family aspect of quail. They take care of their chicks very well, and the chicks mind. Well, every once in a while, the adult that's sweeping the group up has to chastise one of them who wants to hang back or delay a little bit. So it's always fun. But anyway, I wrote about the muttering army. It's the perfect alarm clock with just one flaw. At the crack of dawn every morning, I'm awakened by the subtle chattering of our small army of California quail as they march past my open bedroom window on their way to the seed feeder. And so I don't have, unlike my Amazon device, I don't have the opportunity to turn it off. It just, when they're here, I wake up. So it's kind of a wonderful little benefit, I guess, of the Muttering Army. And here's some of the chicks, and that's the little, by the way, that's just a little terracotta dish, normally that's designed to be put under planters. And I just put that on the ground. If you can see in the very lower left-hand corner, that's a little putty. I run a drip line into there. And so as my garden is watered, the water is kept always available in the little dish. And in the summertime, these usually show up, the chicks usually show up early June, late May, early June. And usually 2 or 3 waves of the chicks come in the next month or so, and it's kind of fun, and they enjoy the water. Now, they're not the only things to enjoy the water, and I was quite surprised. I had always heard that snakes don't drink, that they get all the moisture they need from the food they eat. But one day, and this has happened several times, but this happens to be the one I got the best picture of. I was out in my garden. I have a larger bird fountain in my front yard, and I noticed some movement, and I just sat back quietly for a moment, and this beautiful king snake slithered up out of the shrubbery and over the rim of the pool into the pond to get some water. And I thought, wow, how magnificent. So as I said, water is critical. It really is an important aspect to attracting things to your home if you're interested in doing that. And here again, this is I call it the possum pond, but this is a raccoon using the pond, and they frequently come in at night and will drink here. But although I've had raccoons, possum, coyotes, bobcats, quail, and all other manner of birds drinking out of the possum pond here. So it's frequently used by our wild critters. And here's another picture with a more sophisticated camera setup that I have of one of our raccoons. And this is one of our bobcats passing through. He was moving kind of quick. This is a better shot with a more sophisticated camera. Look at the beauty. Look at the absolute beauty of that animal. He's slim, he's fit, he's beautifully colored, and just magnificent. I love seeing bobcats, and don't see them much in person, but I get them a lot on my game cameras. They're magnificent. And this is our namesake for Mount Hu. Some of you, if you've been a reader for any length of time, you'll know that we used to call ourselves Mount Whoville. And that was because when we first built our home up here on top of the mountain, we had a friend come in and was standing in the window looking down below. We can see from our house all the way down to the Mexican border, but we looked down on Escondido, and she says, "Oh, it looks like Whoville down there." And we thought, "Oh, what a great name, Mount Whoville." Well, when I got ready to write my book, for some reason, I just thought, I better check with the Dr. Seuss Enterprises and see if that's something that's going to be a problem. And so I wrote him a letter, despite the fact of having called it Mount Whoville in print for over 16 years. I told them I was writing a book when there was going to be a compilation of my columns. Anyway, they flatly refused to allow me to use the name Mount Whoville. Even though there is no Mount Whoville, there is Whoville, but there's no Mount Whoville in the Dr. Seuss books. But anyway, my attorney friend told me, well, you could probably win the case, but you don't have the money. So, and Seuss, Dr. Seuss Enterprises does. So I figured, okay, we'll just change it to Mount Hu. It's more reflective of this great horned owl that we get to see a lot. So, story told. The one of the joys of being up on a mountain, and we're about 500 feet to 600 feet above the floor around us. And so a lot of birds hunt below us. We'll hear the screech of a hawk and look out, and they'll be below eye level, soaring along the native vegetation fields that are downhill from the house. And so it provides a a great viewpoint that you often don't get when you're looking at some of these birds of prey. Also, I've written a lot about the bald eagles. If you've followed my column, and as most of you probably know, as birders, the elimination of DDT, along with the expansion of water reservoirs throughout California, have contributed significantly to the expansion of the numbers of bald eagles. And I'm sure all of you are aware that there is a nest, an active nest up near Lake Wolford. And so I spent some time up there, and there was a particular oak tree, this one, where the eagles would perch. It kind of hangs out over the lake, and then they would feed from there. They would dive down and capture fish from that spot. And so I was able to get this magnificent image of a bald eagle from that location. So I've written several columns about the bald eagles. The another thing that we have here on Mount Hua a lot are the monarch butterflies, which I just love, and I've written quite a bit about, again, how just the delicate aspects of this creature and their life cycle and their short life cycle, yet they manage to perpetuate and to continue to bring beauty to our world. And what a wonderful thing. Through the efforts of people who appreciate this kind of wildlife and are planting milkweed and I can't remember the name. Somebody can maybe throw it out. They make these little net cages that you can place over plants that will allow the capture of the butterflies and to protect and to increase their productivity, if you will. These efforts are having a significant impact on the numbers of monarchs that we are now seeing. So that's a very good thing, the citizen science efforts to help out. And along that line, I'm not sure if you're aware, if you read my column, you are, but over in Encinitas, there is I believe it's the San Diego Butterfly Garden. It's a wonderful place. It's only open in the summer and early fall months during the breeding season of the butterflies. And they have a vivarium, which is an indoor, well, it's an outdoor, but it's a netted enclosure with native plants and many of the native species of butterflies that are found here. It's a magnificent place. So this happened to be a column I was going to write, and I was there one day, and I didn't stage this picture. This butterfly actually landed on the nose of the young lady, and I took this picture to include in my column that week. So it's a great place to go. I mean, I don't know of any adults that aren't dazzled by it, but if you've got grandkids or kids, take them there in the summer. It's just it's a magnificent place. Absolutely thrilling to see the butterflies up close in their natural environment. I write a lot too about our local mountains, and this was a story I wrote about spring in a foggy forest. As Joni mentioned, one of my volunteer activities is a fire lookout, U.S. Forest Service fire lookout up on Palomar Mountain. I work at two fire lookouts. One is the Booker Hill Lookout at Palomar Mountain State Park, and one is at the High Point Lookout, which is east of the observatory on the high promontory of Palomar Mountain. And our season begins on May 1st and usually goes towards the end of the year. This year we ended on the last day of November. Some years we've gone all the way into January, all depends on the rainfall. But early in the season, there are many days when there's really nothing to do in the tower. It's we're literally shrouded in fog. And so we might stray out. Usually there's two of us, and get a chance to hike or wander through the mountain trails of Palomar Mountain State Park. And this particular day, it was mystical. It was the kind of day was shrouded in mystery with the fog, and from a distance I could see these white things suspended in the cloud, it looked like. And as I got closer, I could see it was the blossoms of the dogwood tree that were blooming there. And so I wrote a story about it, and some of the other beautiful sights, like the little dewdrops on the lupins that were just starting to leaf out, just made it bejeweled the forest. It was just magnificent and beautiful. And I wrote, shrouding fog draped over the damp forest, creating a fairy tale mood where you might expect to spy a curious gnome peeking from beneath a toadstool. It was that kind of day. So a lot of the stories that I talk about are these kinds of moods that I experience, and I want to share with my readers. And Sally, by the way, just commented that it's called the Butterfly Farms on Saxony Road in Encinitas, and that's correct. I remember that now, and it's butterflyfarms.org. So check it out. And Joni says it is a magical place, and she is absolutely right about that. And I'm completely out of control here, so let me get back on schedule. Yeah, there we go. Okay. And then recently, this isn't in the book, but oftentimes I love just wandering our own backcountry in the fall. There's everybody's gaga over the Northeast, which is, of course, absolutely the pinnacle of fall color when you're in Vermont or New Hampshire or Maine or someplace like that. But don't undersell our own environment here. The cottonwood trees in our backcountry and the black oaks turn their own special kind of colors. And this was a rainy day recently out in the Lake Henshaw area, and just a beautiful misty kind of a shrouded day, but the colors just popped through the fog. So there's plenty to see and do right here in our own neighborhood if you open your eyes to it. And of course, as far as California is concerned, and I always firmly believe that the color display of the Eastern Sierra matches the vast display of the Northeast, but it's different in the sense it's not just color; it's also the grandeur of the mountains, that are so dynamic and special. So, if you get a chance to make a fall color trip, and I've written a lot about this, please do so. Usually the second week to the third week in October are prime time in the Eastern Sierra. And there are a gazillion sources of maps pointing out where to go in what they call the color canyons. And just about any of the major canyons you can think of traveling north from Big Pine. You got Bishop Creek Canyon, and you've got, there's not a lot of fall color right around Mammoth. There is some, but June Lake Loop is spectacular. Lee Vining area. Lundy Lake, this is where this was taken on Lundy Lake Road, Rock Creek, and then further up towards Bishop, Virginia lakes and places like that, all have magnificent color. And if you are lucky enough to get oftentimes you get an early snowstorm in early October. Just imagine the amplification of this scene with white snow on the ground and these brilliant colors. It's really, really worth planning a trip, and it's not as far or as expensive as having to fly back east. Now, many of the stories I've written about, I refer to them as sit and see adventures. And this is a good example. I was at a little place up in, if you've never birded, up in the Toro Peak area, or the Santa Rosa Mountains, up above Palm Springs. It's a magnificent birding area during migratory times, June, May, June, and then again in the fall. And there's only limited water there. And this was a place where there's a perpetual spring that is dripping, and the water gathered in this little small puddle. This puddle wasn't as big as my truck. I mean, it was just a small shallow puddle. But as I sat in a sit and see, by the way, is where you sit motionless for maybe an hour or two, and you allow nature to forget that you're there, and you blend, you become part of the environment, and they forget you're there, and the rhythm of nature returns. The birds will start feeding, the animals will start moving around, and you'll see things that you would probably never see if you're plodding through the woods, making a lot of noise and hiking. And so this particular day, I was fascinated by all the bird activity, and I decided to sit there at this little seat for a little bit, and these swallows would come in and be sipping the water. And I was fascinated by it. And so I got my camera out, and you could kind of predict where they were going to come in. And as you know, they were very, very, very quick, very fast. But as I could see them with my eyes, they were coming in, I'd start taking pictures, and usually one or two would be in focus like this. And just a wonderful experience. And so many of my columns have been the product of sit and see, in the many things that I've been able to encounter that I probably wouldn't have seen or encountered had I been moving through the woods. And I wrote in the book that to truly see and understand nature, you have to become part of it. Find a place that interests you, and you just sit quietly for a while, allowing the industry of nature to resume. So that's the philosophy of sit and see. And I got to tell you, as I get older, that becomes more my habit than trying to destination hike. In fact, my column that's coming up this Sunday is about an encounter with a chuckwalla lizard during one of my sit and see adventures. And so it can be very rewarding. So that is about it. Thanks for watching. And originally when Joni asked me to make this presentation to you wonderful folks this evening, it was going to be live and in person. And, things the way the world is right now, we've gone to Zoom because it's very convenient and very efficient. But I had a box of my books I was going to bring and sell them at a reduced price and autograph them for you. So that opportunity isn't available. However, if you are interested in an autographed copy of There's a Marmot in My Pack, I would be happy to deliver autographed copies to the Nature Center. And all you'd have to do is send me $20 via PayPal, and there's my email address, ernie@packtrain.com. And if you'd like the book autograph personalized, in other words, you want to give it to someone as a gift or something, email me at that same address, ernie@packtrain.com, with that information. And I'll sign the books and make sure that they're delivered to BVAS with your name on them, so that you can have your copies. So that's about it. I don't know if there are any questions. I know Joni said she was going to kind of moderate the questions, and I don't know if there have been any, but I'm certainly happy to answer any that we have. And I'm going to go back to stop my sharing and return the meeting to Joni. And thank you guys for your patience.
Yeah, it doesn't look like do we have any questions? Folks just saying thank you for the talk. And we enjoyed it. Great talk. I don't know, I'll just open the floor up. If folks that have questions, you want to unmute yourself and feel free to do so.
Such a quiet group.
I know. Everybody's quiet tonight.
We have a question.
Okay.
Okay, Ernie, we just are always really happy to hear from you. And we enjoy the grebes that you always talk about at Lake Hodges.
Oh.
So what's going to happen to them this year?
That's a good question. And I, as we all know, nature is extremely resilient. But that water level, I was over there just the other day, is so incredibly low that I don't even know if their nesting habitat is suitable for building nests this year. The sad, as you know, I've written several stories. The sad commentary is, and this isn't critical of the city per se, it's critical of the conflict between environmental laws and water laws. And so like the city says, they're water providers. And so they're doing what they have to do to maintain Lake Hodges to provide water. And so they don't take into account the lowering or the raising of water levels. They don't take the nesting of the grebes into account. And that's tragic. And it's had some tragic consequences. Have you guys had Brian Caldwell as one of your speakers? If you haven't, you should. Brian he's a magnificent individual. He is Scottish to the core. And when you get him excited, you won't understand a word he says because of his Scottish brogue. But he runs Lake Hodges photo tours. And his wife is the curator of, I believe, raptors at the Wild Animal Park. So he's a real birder. And she's a real birder. They know their stuff. And he lives on the lake. His house is right there in Del Dios, and can really talk to you about what is going on there and what the likely impacts of this lowering of the water. And I guess it was necessary. They found some structural issues with the dam that required a significant lowering of the water level to perform repairs. And I'm not sure when those are going to be done. Will they be done in time for spring nesting? I don't know. But we'll see. So that's a long answer to I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
This is Dennis Huckabee. I just wanted to say thank you, Ernie, for such a lovely presentation, and thank you to Joni for arranging it. It's been great. Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Dennis. My pleasure. I enjoy it. So.
But you can write something in the chat.
Sure. Yeah, we're just getting a lot of comments. Thank you.
I don't see any questions. I appreciate your wonderful comments, but yeah.
We can really relate to your stories, and we're nature lovers too.
Yeah, that's the joy for sure. Yeah.
And you have such a gift with words and photos. It's really wonderful to hear your talk. You know, even though we couldn't be in person, but it's the next best thing. It was nice to be able to hear you talking about them.
Well, when I do the next book, we'll schedule a live meeting. So.
Yeah.
All right.
I have a question, Ernie.
Sure, Ellie.
Are you going to be doing or leading any tours in the near future? And
you know,
where?
I haven't. COVID kind of put an end to that, and I really haven't re-energized that effort. I wouldn't rule it out, but currently there's nothing planned.
Okay, thank you.
We have a question in the chat. Can you tell us more about the bald eagles at Lake Wolford? We're watching the nest online at Big Bear Lake.
Oh yeah. Now I haven't been up there right now. I know the nest was used as a roosting location too during non nesting time. But for the last 2 years, there's been fledglings that have been hatched successfully there. I'm trying to think. One of the birds I know is banded, and I sent a copy into the banding people, and they said that bird at that time, this was last year, I believe, the bird was 3 years old and had been banded on Santa Cruz Island as a fledgling. So it's really interesting. So you'll see one that'll have a big patch, a big tag on its wing that you can clearly see through the binoculars. But they're beautiful to watch. If you're up there, just, you can drive down near the boat docks there and just park along the shore and kind of watch for them and get an idea. I suspect they'll be back. I don't see any reason why not. Their nesting location is secure. And of course, their food source is great. They got all that trout they're putting in there that they take and bring back to their chicks. So it's a good place for them.
Any other questions?
It's a quiet group. Well, thank you very much. This has been delightful. And if you ever do get back to live presentation, and Joni, if you want to know where to find Brian Caldwell, if you can, he's got a website, Lake Hodges Photo Tours, that you should be able to find him there. But if not, just send me a note. I can give you his contact information.
Great.
But he would be a delightful speaker for you guys.
That was great. We're always on the lookout for good speakers. Okay, well, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So thank you, Ernie. And I will, when we send out the recording information, I will include a note about the book if anybody's interested in taking Ernie up on his offer.
Yeah, thank you.
But thank you again, Ernie, for being with us tonight. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And we'll look forward to having you come back again sometime.
All right, my pleasure. Good night, everybody.
Okay. Good night, everybody. Thank you for coming.